Hello everyone and welcome back to another Moxtober Daily Recap. I'm Caillou, joined by Mark Confidant and Bradley Rose, and today's theme is Duel. For those of you who don't know what Moxtober is, it's an annual event where for each day of the month of October, there's a different one-word prompt, and based on that prompt, people perform various creative endeavors related to Magic the Gathering. Most people make custom cards, which is what we're going to be looking at today and for all of the other reviews, but people also make deck lists, art, or articles, basically anything creative related to Magic the Gathering. As always, the collected mtg.design and MSC files for these cards are present in the description, along with designer credit and instructions on how you can submit your own cards to potentially be featured in these recaps. But with that, let's just get into the first card of the day. And I'm going to go with Amadeus Prodigal Composer from the MSC file. Um, so this is a very simple card. It's legendary bard creatures you control have banding. And because it has that one line, it has the full banding RT. So essentially, I guess they took Duel as Battle of the Bands. So you get to make your own band, literally, because you're bringing bards together. I thought this was incredibly silly, um, obviously super mechanically narrow, but I think it's a type of card which um, sets I think Melvin is like the one that cares about like mechanical cuteness, right? That kind of thing. So I think that this is a card definitely for those people, and I think you could probably make a commander deck of this work, and if you can't right now, I'm sure you can at some point in the future. But yeah.
Yeah. Although it's too bad that is it Yosan? The green legendary bard
Mm-hmm.
is green, so you can't put it in this blue red deck. So you know what that means. You have to get a teamer colored bard that's legendary so you can throw all of them in. Yeah, I thought it was brilliant because bards use instruments sometimes for their craft. At least the modern depictions show them using instruments, even though you just have to tell tales. But playing in a band, that's music. There you go. Wonderful. Maybe if it just said bard creatures without the legendary, maybe that opens up a bit more.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty harmless slash easy change. Because come on, not every member of a band is legendary. Sometimes it's just a drummer who stays on for a season and then swaps off.
I gotta say, I'm pretty embarrassed that on my read through, I didn't get this. My brain didn't say banding in its head. I just saw that it was banding, and I was like, oh, why would a person put banding on a card? And I just didn't put two and two together.
It took me a second. Like, it's one of those things where I think it is definitely subtle enough that you can miss it. So, and I think I also had the advantage of seeing it when they submitted it earlier and seeing a comment about Battle of the Bands. And so, like, my mind went back to that. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's what they meant.
What I wonder whether there's a test you can do on cards, like a one with nothing test or something, where it's like if this thing has a hidden purpose to what it's doing, can a person get the hidden purpose? Maybe one with nothing is the wrong card for that example because it's like the hidden purpose is that there is no purpose for that one.
You
But
could just call it the lenticular test because it is a form of lenticularism, I suppose.
Yeah, there are some cards that have like a little joke to them that people are like, "Oh, okay." Maybe like the card Apes of Wrath, which is more of a outdated sort of reference that they would make compared to nowadays, but yeah, that's a reference to Grapes of Wrath. Another a mechanical execution here. 4-2. That's good. Because it encourages you to give you a reason for forming a band with another because you can banding can choose up to one other creature without banding. So get your highest toughness stuff and pair them up with Amadeus.
Though that did make me realize, kind of wasted flavor potential. Give it like 4/4 for a time signature or something like that.
Oh my gosh. perfect.
I guess it'd be terrible, but in theory, could you have 4/2 as a time signature? It'd just be like 4 half note. No, that's awful.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a music theory person, so I'll leave that to the people who do know. I just did band in in like middle school, so I'm like, ah, yes, 3/4 and 4/4. I know those. I also know
I
a
feel like
6/8.
I think that might be the sort of time signature where the music theory police come and arrest you, but is technically conceivable. Either way, people in the comments will feel free to correct me because I definitely don't know enough to say one way or the other.
Okay. And to give the people in the comments another reason to get on your ass, what is your first card you're presenting today?
Let's see here. I think I'm going to go with a card in mtg.design. It's Agiloth the Challenger. 3 red red for a 5/5 giant warrior. It has cowards can't block warriors. And whenever Agiloth the Challenger attacks, defending player chooses a creature they control. Agiloth fights that creature. And whenever a creature a player controls dies, other creatures they control become cowards until end of turn. This is just a really sweet way to do warrior tribal and also do like a creature that does fighting repeatedly in a way that doesn't necessarily spiral out of control. Obviously, like if your opponent only has weak creatures, then they're going to die to a repeated series of fights and functional falters from a 5/5 hitting them in the face. That's very alliterative. Anyway, it's it's kind of really aggressive along that front. It's probably a pretty obvious limited bomb, but I feel like the effect is so evocative. This feels like a top-down Goliath in a very cool way to me.
I'm trying to think of how often it would happen that you would attack and they would choose a creature that bounces off of the fight. And otherwise, if it doesn't happen often enough, it can actually turn out to be gameplay pattern equals. Usually, this is an unblockable 5/5.
An unblockable 5/5 that's also a removal engine. So I think that
Yeah, yeah.
this is probably, well, actually, more recent sets have had a better density of powerful removal at common. But I still think that like if you don't have removal for this, this could in limited this could be nightmarish. Obviously in constructed, for 5 mana you can get much better things on raid. But yeah, I flavorfully, I don't want that to be. I don't want to make it sound like I'm knocking on the card. I think just the stuff that I like mechanically and flavorfully about it, you guys have already kind of covered base on that. So
Um, the I this is funny. Both of you mentioned ones I had on my list. Like I was gonna start with Amadeus, but Kaio, you opened up with Amadeus, and then I was like, fine, I'll go to ntg.design and pick up Agaloth, and then Marcus picked Agaloth, which is great, which shows that I love also Agaloth as well. And the reason is for the coward part. We've seen this before on like Cowards Can't Block Warriors. That's like a running uh, reference that you can make. But the thing that I love here is you get to see over time the cowardice happen. Whereas other cards, usually it's like it's already a coward, whether the Modern Horizons card says, oh yeah, this does cowards can't do this, or the original card that makes cowards can't blow up warriors, it's more of a functional like, oh yeah, you just become a coward. But this, you can see why they're cowardizing, I guess. Cowarding is because someone's dying, and you're like, oh shoot, our teammates can die, so now I'm scared.
I do also kind of like that that bit is symmetrical in that you might whoopsies falter yourself if your opponent has a removal spell and the ability to alpha strike. The idea that turnabout is fair play there is an interesting knob. I wonder a little bit whether it would be one that would be frustrating in person, though.
Ooh, I missed that. That's good.
but it is only warriors, so unless they have warriors of their own, it's less of a it's less of an issue because it makes one of your creatures probably, unless you have like a huge density of warriors yourself. But yeah. Okay. Now that we've swooped both your first and second choice, what's your third first card gonna be?
Yeah, let's go with one in the MSE file, Duelist of the Witching Hour. So this one, I got a little sneak peek before in the Discord, but I remember how I felt when I saw this, which was it reminded me of the Lorwyn mechanic Clash, where you get to compare mana values. But in this case, I like this a lot more for a quote unquote clash for a duel, because you get to have a degree of control over what you put forth to compete with. And it gives you this interesting dilemma in your hand. You're like, maybe you're thinking you got a 3 mana value thing and a 5 mana value thing, and you really want to hold on to the 5 mana value, but you really want to win, but you're not sure if they have something that's too low or not. And I think that's super great to have that little tension there of whether or not you want to pitch your highest card to ensure your victory.
Especially since if you just go ham at the start, you steadily start running out of your high mana value cards. And your opponent can just kind of play around it by being like, okay, I'll pitch lands to start off with. And then when it really matters, boom, bim, bam, there goes all of your dual triggers. Yeah, I think that
One
the
thing,
looting is really important because, like, one of the things is uh, there's a huge feels bad if you just like usually if you like lose clashes and stuff because it's like, oh, cool, I get nothing then. But I think here there's like thing, oh, okay, I lost the duel, but I still got to do some card filtering if I needed it.
there's
Mm.
also this cool thing there of like, win the battle, lose the war. Like the tension you guys were talking about with regards to like getting your 5 drop or getting the victory in the duel is one of player choice and control over the situation. So you have this tension where like the looting can be great at fixing your draws, or it can be great at giving you like an apology for if you're losing duels, or the duel incentive can be such that you're willing to throw your best card in the garbage if they're at like 2 life, for example. The one thing I do kind of wish was the case for this, and this is also true for Clash, maybe a little bit less for this, but I wish you won ties as the player initiating the duel.
Yeah,
Mm.
that makes a lot of sense because yeah, actually I really like that. Just it makes the play pattern so much better. It gives you an incentive to kind of like more incentive to mind game. Yeah, no, yeah,
Oh yeah. Yes, +1. I'm imagining the late game, both players are top decking lands. It's cool to push the game towards an end instead of just nothing happens.
There's also a sweet pattern in the late game where you can play this, go hell bent, discard nothing, and op has to discard something that isn't a land in order for you to not win the duel.
Ooh.
yeah. So
Oh.
before we move on, just want to say shout out to Cajun for this design, and then for the previous design we showed off, it was Grace Fallon, otherwise known as Angel of Grace for Amadeus Prodigal Composer. And then all the way back for Agiloth, it was G0M8. So, oh, it's probably Go Mate, but stylized. Um, so, thanks to all three of these designers for the designs.
Also, for the record, Brad, I had this on my list, so we're having a very circular Venn diagram today.
It was also on
I
my
figure,
list.
yeah, I figure Cajun's got the spice sometimes.
Mhm.
I think the last episode was actually the first episode where a Cajun design did not make an appearance. And looking back, it is actually because it appears there was some error when Cajun submitted to LackeyBot, so the image file didn't actually get into the MSC file. And so I think if the image had gotten in, there's like a 60% chance that Cajun would have kept up the streak.
Oh,
So So there's a
Well,
flag on the plate. We have to redo the entire episode.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Okay, my next card is going to be from the MSC file, and it's Arcane Duel, designed by Mikkjal. Um, this is a really simple card. This spell costs one less for each cleric, wizard, warlock, shaman, or druid it targets. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. And I love it's not just if it targets cleric, wizard, warlock, or shaman that you control. It cares about what your opponent has as well to make it a true arcane magic duel. Um, yeah, and it's just a really simple common. Uh, the Moxtober cube in me loves that. Um, and I love this like this informal batching of like these are the magic user types, though it doesn't have Mystic, which is actually a canon type and tomorrow's word. So shame on you, Mikkjal.
well, maybe the next level thing is they might have seen the blog posts from Mark Rosewater and one of the creatives saying it's a supported but not for future mage class. Mystic is just stuck where it is. I don't know if that's a commentary or maybe yeah, depends on where you're at in this duel.
One thing I
Uh,
enjoy about this is the flavor of if you get it cheaper off of targeting your opponent's thing, but not your thing, and you're just suckering some magic user into getting into a brawl with a big old giant or something.
yeah, yeah, super clean and elegant here. Awesome +1. That first line is all you need to know. All you need to have for the arcane duel flavor.
Yep, yep. Yeah, and before we move on, I just want to shout out that this is from Mikkjal's set Astromancers of Telluria. Um, it's a pretty cool kind of magic users and astrology kind of based set. Um, and it just recently finished development. So if you can either just Google Astromancers of Telluria, look it up on Plane Sculptors, or check it out on the Custom Magic Discord if you happen to be there. But yeah, um, Mark, what is your next card?
My next card is also from MSC. It is the Weak and the Mighty. It's choose one, destroy target creature with the greatest power among creatures on the battlefield, or put an indestructible counter on target creature with the least toughness among creatures on the battlefield. Um, I feel like these are really evocative modes and just kind of capture sort of what's going on there. It's again, and I don't know what it is if that's just like an archetypal duel, but there's a lot of David and Goliath stuff kind of going on in today's card pool, and I think this one had just a great way of doing it. Either stop the strong thing or make the weak thing able to brawl.
I like that you can end up not having what you want to which mode you want because your opponent is outdoing you in whether they have the weakest or smallest creature or the biggest or you have the biggest creature and they don't have something big enough.
Yeah, it
So
looks
that's cool.
like a very strong card for rate at first until you see that it doesn't say opponent controls or you control, which makes it have like a lot more play to it. So,
Hmm.
I can imagine a situation where you get stuck where your opponent has like a bunch of 4/4s and a 1/1, and you have like a 5/5 and some 2/2s, and you're just you get no equity out of it.
yeah, or they have like a bunch of chump blockers and you have like a 4/4, but they have a 2/2 flyer that they're just chipping away at you with and you're like, "Ah, damn it. Can't actually remove this
Yeah.
pesky 2/2."
Yeah, I guess you would never want the biggest thing. You're it makes me want to yeah, build the deck of all 1/1s or let's see, at least toughness. Challenge accepted zeros. No, I'm just kidding.
I think there is. Wait, what is that? There's a black commander who does that, right? Who's like all about power and toughness one.
That
Uh,
sounds right.
There's
Yeah.
at least the blue. There's the blue one. Maybe that's the one you're thinking of. Unblockable
No. Those
ones.
I forgot that one. It's a
Shizo Death Storehouse or something like that.
yeah. I remember the art very distinctly, and I remember like that's a
Oh,
Kamigawa style. Um, but yeah. So shout out to InfinityChef for this design.
One other small thing about this design that I like. I really like removal that doesn't have a huge amount of coverage but has another mode. So it can be removal in like, I don't know, maybe hitting like 50% of overall targets in a card pool or less, but then has something else you can do when it's totally blank.
Reminds me of when people would just like play turn one. What is a giant killer? Cause yeah, it's still a respectable one drop even if you don't get the removal mode. So
Yeah.
okay, what's your next card gonna be, Bradley?
let's go over to mtg.design. This card is called Duel to the Death. And this introduces a keyword called duel. It's kind of a riff on fight. This is by Kaokun. I think this is cool because it does carry over not just carry over the first strike, double strike dynamic of combat, but also includes equipped creatures, and I think that is an important inclusion here because I the amount of first strike and double strikers that you might face feels very slim compared to the possible opponents that you would have. Including equipped creatures helps bump up that number to help make the gameplay here kind of interesting and matter for who you're choosing to target. You're like, oh shoot, their blue deck may not have first strike, double strike, but they're running tons of equipment. And the thing I want to actually duel, they will also destroy my creature, which maybe I'll be fine with it, but it means I can't just pick on it and walk away unscathed.
Yeah, and it also I think there's the interesting dynamic of I think the like you can definitely have like first strike quote unquote tribal, but I think the equipped caught my eye when I looked over this card on MTG.design because like, oh, yeah, I could actually see like a proper archetype where it's like its equipments matter and you just have duel in there as like an interesting way to support it rather than a full theme. You know what I mean? It's just like it's there as fight, but wink wink draft equipments. So yeah, I'm a fan.
I also like how this is going to be a weird thing to compliment though, but I like how rules imprecise the reminder text is because you're super allowed to do that in reminder text, and not a lot of designers give themselves permission to, myself included, to be clear. Um, and it's one of those things where you can just say it in the most grokkable way, where a Magic player reading it will be like, "Oh, of course it works this way," and then leave the like, "Oh, this creature deals damage, then state-based actions are checked, and then the other creature deals damage." Leave that to the comprehensive rules, where like a Magic judge will encounter it, but nobody else needs to.
For
Mm,
sure. Because, yeah, reminders
plus
text
one.
not being rules text is something. Yeah, like I wish more custom designers took advantage of that. Like, um, I think there's some fantastic reminder text as flavor text. Like, the most iconic one is "The land still burns." Um, I forget which card it is that puts blaze counters on on lands, but yeah, um, that's just a really flavorful way of saying, "Hey, the effect persists even if this creature leaves the battlefield." But you can just put in reminder text for maximum flavor and grokkability. Um,
One thing that
okay,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, you
I,
go.
I was going to say that with the advent of like flavor words, I think there might be a little bit more reminder text as flavor in the future, perhaps. Even though it's not exactly the same thing, but I think they're moving into kind of exploring more ways to convey flavor than just the standard. We have flavor text art and a name, which is already a lot of flavor weight. But yeah,
One thing that reminds me of is, if any of y'all have ever played Eternal, there's a mechanic called Revenge that's basically a form of like creature recursion when a creature dies. And there's one creature that has the rules text, this creature's revenge never ends. so it just keeps coming back. And obviously, like a digital game has more leeway to be a little rules imprecise when it comes to its rules text because the engine does it all for you. But I just like that as a really evocative piece of text.
Ooh, okay. All right, yeah. This creature's prowess never ends. Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next card is going to be Time of Duel from the MSE file. Um, so this is a pretty simple card. Let me grab it right here. It's a target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. If it became day this turn, the creature you control deals damage equal to its power to the other creature instead. I think there was like one other card in the whole file that referenced day night as like a thing of like it's morning, it's time to duel. But I feel like that implementation was a little clunky, while this one just felt really solid to me. It's just a good uh, I forget what the one mana fights like. It's a good prey upon. I think that's the one which is a fight spell. But then it turns into a one mana rabid bite if you fulfill the condition. It's just yeah. I'm a big fan of this one. I don't know that there's much to say, so shout out Sharkarat for this design.
How
Oh
do you
yeah,
feel
yeah.
about this in the context of like werewolves, or let's just say like Innistrad limited more broadly?
It cares about day for this, so it feels like this is like quote unquote the humans' favored card, which seems cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I also think that like I don't really know if I care to set this on Innistrad. I guess I actually like it for the opposite reason because I feel like it demonstrates that day and night potentially have flavor and mechanical space to appear in a set outside of Innistrad, where I could totally see. Though the day night cycle is like super tied to what's going on there, you could totally have another set where night is maybe like all the rogues and whatever, and day you have like this flavor of honor. I could see like a very Three Musketeers esque set maybe that's kind of like Florentine-ish aesthetic and flavor that takes that adopts that definition of day and night.
Yeah, maybe some combination of like old Western style or like Sherlock Holmes style, where like crimes are happening in the night and then lawmen are up in the day doing things. I could see that. There's this strange thing with this though, where your opponent has the entirety of the control over whether or not it will become day when this fight will happen.
Hmm. Then again, you can maybe hold the card in your hand for. I guess it feels bad to be like, oh, I really wanted to cast it now, but I'm waiting.
Maybe interesting as like uh, a pounce variant, so you put it at 1G instant and then just let it do its thing that way.
Yeah.
And then the play pattern is a little more kosher.
I I love the selection of. I off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember all the time-based mechanics in Magic, but using day night as the time-based thing as for dueling, that's great because duels are that's one element. We meet at this time to fight. Yeah, so that's great taking advantage of that marriage.
Okay, Mark, what is your next card going to be?
Let's see here. I like this card for color pie reasons, and well, it's a really interesting card. Parry. It's one red for an instant. You can pay red rather than paying the spell's mana cost if the target you control has also become the target of a spell or ability you don't control this turn. Target creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. It deals damage equal to its power to up to one target creature you don't control. Um, I just very much like this as a trap because it just latches onto what a parry is very effectively. I'm not positive that I would necessarily do it in red. It seems like there's a couple of ways you could do this in like several different colors and it would work. You could do it as like a green-white card. You could do it. There's this element to parries from a top-down perspective that is that the thing that is doing the parrying gets to survive, if that makes sense. Like they block the blow that was going to hurt them, so they get to then make a mortal strike of their own.
So
And this one,
potentially, it's just like target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. It deals damage equal to its power up to one target creature you don't control. So
yeah,
like,
something like that.
yeah, I can see that as a white card. Oh, sorry, not white. I can see that as a green card for sure.
Yeah, or like green white, it gets indestructible until end of turn, and it bites something or fights something, and then maybe if it's been targeted, you can drop off the green. Is white allowed to like reactively save itself from a spell and then punish the opponent for having targeted with a spell
Yeah, but I think
via
fighting
fight?
an opponent's creature is a bit out of white's pie. So
Yeah, that's pushing it.
I think
But
that
I
like some other thing that's represent like they maybe read no redirecting the spell would be more red. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, deflecting swat, parry. Although this, I guess, doesn't redirect it; it leans into it. This does the hexproof brainstorming we're doing. Um, I also, yeah, I love the cost reduction because a parry is leveraging what your opponent throws at you. So, uh, you can be like, "Hey, I couldn't have cast this without you, buddy. Thanks."
It was a team effort.
like you guys get where I'm coming from here though, as far as like this is a really good use of the namespace, and even so, it tempts me to try and use that namespace even better.
Yes, we got to get the perfect parry in Magic, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's one thing that I see a lot where it's like, in fact, just earlier today, I saw someone going like, "Man, I wish they hadn't used Danse Macabre, and I forget what the other one was, um, as card names or like they because like they people didn't like the implementation." I think that's definitely something to be aware of, where it's like once you've used a name, you can never use it again. So saving high impact uh, names for either spells that are either they're commons and they're super reprintable, so you get use out of that name and flavor again and again, or they're really flashy rares which make an impact on constructed, so the memory of them lasts forever. But yeah,
yeah, exactly. I
Mhm.
This might be a hot take, but I kind of wish Wizards was willing to recycle the namespace on some of the absolute like total stinkers that nobody sleeves up to this day from like I don't know 97 or so.
I I would not be inclined to disagree. I think that like the problem is just eternal formats exist, but I think like I think you could definitely make considerations where it's like it's named like I don't know, let's say it's named ancestral recall, but then in Oracle text it's actually ancestral recall dash set code or whatever. Um, though maybe that could be prove confusing for like sorcerer spyglass type stuff. Uh, there might not be a clean solution, but I would really love for that to be the case.
See, the fix that I have is just stuff like, oh, okay, indestructible aura is removed from the vintage card pool, so we can make another indestructible aura that actually does stuff. And you would only do it for things that like are in the absolute garbage tier of EDH recommendations, and also see no play in every constructed format, and also probably don't even see play in like Penny Dreadful or Block
Mm-hmm.
Constructed or what
Yeah,
have you.
I think it's probably safest to do for cards which are already strictly bettered by cards in their pool. So that way, there's not even a thing of like, hey, this card we removed from the card pool. Turns out that like people are like, man, this could be a really stealth tech option versus this deck. Then it's just like, oh yeah, that it has the potential for tech option, but there's also 12 cards that were printed recently that just do that better. So there's literally no reason to have it in the card pool. But yeah, little diversion on card names aside, what is your next card going to be, Bradley?
All right, let's go to MSE. And the card here is called Never Meant to Win. This is by gynoidpoet. Um, okay, so this is a cool, simple mashup of two things we've seen before on other kill spells. So one is that Eliminate has the same um, mana value, and it does destroying of the 3 mana value or less thing. Okay. And then with the 4 or greater part, well, we've seen Despark, which shows Nicol Bolas being destroyed, and it cares about mana value 4 or greater. That implies that like these are the big bad, and when you put these two together, if you care about controlling one of these big bads, and it recontextualizes that the thing that you are getting rid of isn't just like it was small enough to kill. It was actually like this is the hero against me being the big bad, and yeah, so it's a nice mashup for that.
Yeah, I'm gonna be
I
real.
like
I missed the symmetry between between the mana value 4 or greater and the mana value 3 or less, and I was just like, yeah, I guess it's a nice removal design. And I'm not sure that I vibe with it. But now that like you've called that out, I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually a really great uh that's a really great again, mechanics is flavor. I feel like this is becoming like a broken record thing when I say mechanics is flavor, but just so many people are doing it so well this year that like I'm odd each time. So
Hmm.
I like the 3 to 4 dividing line as being the like truly large creature dividing line because 4 feels like the biggest creature size that you can like reasonably cast without it being like somewhat of a reach. When you start getting to like 5 or 6, it becomes like where the real like huge monsters are. Where 4 is like, okay, I could see myself playing a 4 drop in any deck and not feeling like a total dingus for doing it. Um, but I still have to like reach for it. It still has to be like a quote unquote real creature for that to happen.
Yeah, it's hard to play 2 4 drops in limited on the same turn, right? And whereas or you can feasibly do it with 2 3 drops so that it feels like they're quote unquote small enough to fit two of them in a turn.
hmm.
Yeah, and then like the I feel like one of the things that is appealing about Neverwent to Win is the idea of like on turn 5 slamming a 4 drop and then just icing their mana value 3 creature either on your turn or theirs. And I don't think that you can achieve that nearly as easily when you get to like 5 and 6 drops.
Hmm. Or like you play this in Esper Control and you like Teferi untap a permanent on turn 4 or 5 or whatever, and then it's just like, oh yeah, the perfect mana value 1 removal spell.
Yeah.
Okay, my next card is going to be incredibly similar to my last card, but I'm on a roll with liking these simple common designs. So we're gonna go to Quick Draw in the mtg.design file specifically. 1 in a red. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. If the creature you control has a first strike or double strike, it instead deals damage equal to its power to the creature you don't control. So hey, it's another one of these, except this one is actually a pounce when maybe the other one should have been a pounce. But again, I like that this idea of fight, no, bite is like a resonant enough idea for a duel as like draw first, um, that it kind of came out here. I almost wish haste was bundled into this because I always love stuff that makes haste more relevant on things that aren't the turn that the creature came in. I think that's a really fun way to like make that keyword more relevant. So, and it makes flavorful sense here. But otherwise, yeah, it's just a simple and cool common. So shout out to CyberFive.
I slightly disagree about the haste thing, but that's mostly because I like being able to forget about haste when it's not the turn the thing came down. I like not having to care about a thing having haste because um I don't know. Because it's allowed to not matter, my brain has reached the point where I don't want to track it past turn 1. And when I do, I feel like, "Oh, we agreed that wasn't supposed to matter now."
At least when they have done this more recently in the food golem world, with can't be blocked except by creatures with haste, that like with this as with that card, this card only really cares about at the time of, like, it's a secret in your hand, so the opponent could have just forgotten about it, but you are always monitoring, maybe like it's a reminder to you. um I don't know. Do you think you would miss haste in the text box while it's in your hand, and then when you look on the battlefield, you do forget that the opponent has haste?
It's possible that I would. So, does it bite if their creature has haste and yours also has haste in this
Oh,
hypothetical?
yeah, yeah. It only cares about your. Okay, that's actually even better to maybe argument for having haste on your. Yeah, I'll remember I have a raging goblin. So maybe I'm okay with it. But I understand yeah, like I want to also just be like, oh, it has like this thing is a vanilla, but no, it's not, because now there's like five more cards in the standard pool that's all of a sudden cares about haste. So I gotta like always track haste as some kind of tag.
There's one other thing that I don't like about caring about haste, which is there's some inconsistency as to whether specifically tokens or things that are brought out by another spell gain haste permanently or haste until end of turn, and that can be a stumbling block. But like, this is just me being neurotic about like one niche edit that Caillou would make. This is probably getting a little caught in the weeds again. Sorry, I keep being very distractible about stuff today.
No, I think that, well, we're here to discuss, is that is basically the point. So, and I think that,
How dare you just stir good discussions for future design principles?
mhm. Okay. Mark, what is your next card? Like, I'm gonna give you more time to ramble. Gosh.
Let's see here. Uh, where did it go? Did I write down the name of a card that was actually just designed by a person?
It might
Uh,
also be that it the it's not in the file because of art reasons. Do you
oh no,
remember?
it was an MSC card. I just couldn't find it in my scroll with my eyes, apparently. I'm gonna go with Emory the Dread Duelist. It's a Mardu for a 3 loyalty planeswalker. Whenever a creature dies, you may activate one of Emory's loyalty abilities. You plus it to deal 1 damage to target player. You minus it to have each player discard a card and then draw a card. Well, you draw a card, your opponent doesn't. And then you minus 5 it to deal 3 damage to each creature and each opponent. Um, I really like the idea of your loyalty abilities as a triggered ability, or I don't know if that's the most accurate way to describe it, but like loyalty abilities outside of ordinary timing windows on a planeswalker. Um, and this one not enabling any sort of like chaining off with killing stuff is probably quite good, with the exception of the ultimate. The ultimate, if you have 6 loyalty, you can melt most of the board and then like plus it a bunch of times, which is a sweet way to do an ultimate, to have like a valid 5 loyalty ultimate and a valid 6 loyalty ultimate. Um, One thing that's a little bit tricky for the -2 is if you're hellbent, it does just straight draw you a card. I'm not sure if I agree with that or disagree with it. I just think it's worth noting.
Good point. Yeah, the best person that can probably draw is, or best color here is black, but they should nowadays lose one life when they get a free draw. Um, I'm thinking about, so there's that -5, 3 damage to each creature. So you manage to get there with the 5 loyalty, or I guess 6 to make sure it lives. Um, so now maybe say 6 creatures died, then you get 6 more activations. So you get to keep shooting. Maybe that's part of what is intended. You can just you're like a gunslinger and you keep shooting a bunch of ones. Maybe you do 6 damage to the opponent as well.
Yeah, it really is. Like when I saw this, I was like, "What's going on here?" It's like, "Oh, it's a Blood Artist Planeswalker, essentially." Um, and yeah, and I love because you mentioned you just keep shooting, and the art has the man with guns coming out of every fold of clothing, essentially. Um, but yeah,
Oh man.
and notably, you still have to like pay the loyalty cost. So like the which is something that I really love. So it's not like you can just shred opponent's hand with this. Um, you still have to uh, you still have to like if you like get to -5 and then just wipe the board and then kill like 3 more creatures. You can go like +1/+1 -2, but you can't go like -2 -2 -2. So yeah, and overall, I don't know how I wouldn't be a big fan of this. It's just so good.
I respect quite a bit the um making the +1 not have Emory protect themselves. Because it would probably be pretty gross if it did. So having like a fine +1 that's not amazing, and just having to rely on your presumably aristocrats creatures to keep Emory alive is a pretty darn good knob to have.
Yeah, it really encourages you to make sure that you play a bunch of those other creatures. Yeah, I'll protect my planeswalker. It's fine. I keep shooting.
Okay, Bradley, what is your next card going to be?
Okay, let's go to mtg.design and we're going to go to Honorable Duel. All right. So in the background, you may hear there's a siren. Sorry, everybody. Ambiance. Okay, so this is by Thou Hast Been Owned or Pwned. So this one's doing a little commentary on giving fight to white, at least. Green's got it, but so in this case, the opponent chooses what they fight with, and I went, oh, okay. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe now white usually likes to be able to do things under conditions, as long as it justifies it, quote unquote. And this looks like it's doing a good job doing justification, uh, of like, oh yeah, I'm not picking on you. You're the one who is putting forth your champion.
Yeah, I almost feel like mechanically this could also be green-black because it feels very edicty almost in how it ends up playing out. I don't know if that's just me, but yeah, I think it's interesting. It's definitely it feels like that there's like white-red cards which make a creature deal damage to itself equal to its power. It definitely feels similar to that. It's like, why are you hitting yourself? Why would you do that? Kind of dumb of you to do that, honestly. It wasn't not my fault. So I don't know if I 100% buy this as white, but I think that it's one of those things where it isn't a non-starter, which I think is a very interesting place to be in color pie discussions, because then you get into the thing of like, it's not just that this it's not that this violates a weakness of the color. It's just that it's something that the color hasn't really gotten before, and so how does it factor into the play patterns of that color? So yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree because conceptually, the reason why green gets fight is to shore up a weakness that was existing in green already, and it pushes a little bit into red just because red loves dealing damage, and it's not outside of red's color pie. Pushing it into white it's bendy in a way that the color police aren't going to come and arrest you for, but it's also something white doesn't necessarily need. Like white's existing removal for attacking or blocking, or permanent exile removal that's expensive, or permanent exile removal that says I'm sorry afterwards. That spectrum of removal spells um, makes white pretty good at removing creatures already. It doesn't necessarily need this, but it's not inconceivable that white could get it without anybody having like a conniption.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would imagine maybe a set that cares about fight matters. Then it would be like, oh, okay, here's a reason why white can do a fight. Because yeah, otherwise, yeah, white already has the tools to deal with any permanent. Yeah.
Okay, next up. What is your next card going to be, Bradley?
Oh, that was just mine. I think
Oh,
next up is you.
oh, okay. Never mind then. I got mixed up. I'm so sorry. Um,
Hey, it's all good.
so this is going to be our last round. So just choose your cards with that in mind. Um, I'm going to go to the mtg.design file for Cleanse Combat. Um, and this is uh, 3 red and a green. The spell can't be countered. Destroy all auras and equipments. Remove all counters and all permanents. Um, and this scene, when I saw this, I was like, wow, I'm kind of surprised. Maybe we already have an effect of this style and I just forgot about it. But I think the combination of like, no, we're going to play fair feels very red green to me. I also think that the fact that it's incidental planeswalker hate is pretty cheeky because that is something that like green red can get as like a non-creature permanent hate. Um, I almost kind of wish this was instant, uh, and maybe a little bit more expensive, where you remove the can't be countered, or you remove all permanents, like some other knob. But I like the idea of this as just like a huge combat trick. Um, but yeah, like it's this
Yeah.
interesting thing of like play fair now, kids, and it. And I'm also a fan of the what do you call it? Flavor text on this as well. Does feel very gruel. So yeah, shout out to SolarSafari. Overall, this is just a dope design.
There's
And
go ahead.
oh, go ahead, Marcus.
Okay. There's this thing that I think might be in the realm of unhashed color pie debates, which is what color or colors should removing counters be in. I know it's at least in theory in black with like vampire hexmage variants,
We
and
also
there's this
have like
kind
a
of
sun cleanser in white
yeah.
that removes counters from players.
There's also an argument to be made, and I'm not sure I buy this, but the argument's there that that is some form of like oblique rule setting,
Hmm.
like
Okay.
because it does the like you can't get that sort of counter anymore. That is just saying, okay, players are playing without counters on them now, as the rule or something. If that makes sense.
It makes
Yeah.
sense, but I think that like it's one of those things where like if you go down that road, you can be like, well, my mono white lava spike makes sense because I'm establishing the rule of you don't get to play the game. I'm obviously being
Yeah.
facetious, but I think that uh, I think that the rule setting justification might not be the one for giving white counter removal. It might just be that like I could see arguments in green, blue, and white as just like, and green and blue mostly, but white secondary is like they do counter manipulation and moving counters already, as we've seen in a bunch of sets. So green and blue for sure. White because it cares about counters can do counter manipulation presumably in a similar way. Black because it's like effectively a -X that it's like putting a -X aura on that thing. I think red is probably the only color where it gets a little weird for justifying that.
Oh, to be clear, what I was saying was that that's not a reason to give white counter removal as a form of rule setting. The argument is that that card, Sun Cleanser, is not really counter removal. It's like a hate bear, and white is allowed hate bears or something.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, so I guess like where is red on this would be the question. If um, is it just the can't be countered clause is red and the rest of it's green?
Um.
I think that the red is probably also hating on equipment, but it's mostly I think it's mostly a thing of flavoring it into gruel. And I think it's also one of those things where it's like, well, two color cards don't need to be in both of their colors. Like in the sense of like this could easily be a mono green card, but I think it's more evocative as a red green card. And unless there's like some sort of like play pattern thing where in constructed like getting the mana for this is not as viable or whatever, I think it's probably just fine at red green.
I what I would do to make this feel more red for the removal part, just to try to keep it as is as much as possible, is if I can phase out or exile and then return the auras and equipment and all the counters, however it's worded, and just temporarily just go gloves off today, let's fight, and then return them, then I would make it would feel more red to me. Otherwise, I would just change that red pip to black. I am a fan of black being associated with removal of counters.
I guess, but it
But
also
yeah, that's what I
I think
would
it feels less green at that
do
point
for
as
the red
well.
part. Just do temporary removal.
Because then it's like green is there, why can't I just straight remove this? I feel like would be the question.
Mm. Oh, I love having this available for dealing with the Voltron decks that have stacked up hexproof, indestructible, all that stuff. And like, well, I'm trying to interact with you, but this will be just deal with that.
Yeah, that's actually fair. I like that. Okay. So, Mark, what is your last card going to be?
My last card here. I'm going to talk about the card that I designed for this a little bit. Sorry if it's a little bit of a vanity thing. The card I designed is Honor-Bound Duelist. It's a rare 1 white and a red for a 3/3 human noble warrior. It has haste, vigilance, and it attacks and blocks each combat if able. And it has the ability word Indomitable. Whenever Honor-Bound Duelist survives damage, exile target non-land card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard, and cast a copy of that card without paying its mana cost. So the idea here is someone who's just like all about fighting and will always pick a fight, but then you get a payoff in this kind of fighting centric, probably Naya focused mechanic that gives you a triggered ability by merit of having lived through whatever sort of fighting was happening. Kind of like Ferocious, but without the freebie trigger that Ferocious would get when you just killed a thing with a removal spell, or like a burn based removal spell, or it lost combat.
I don't know if this makes sense, but this is I think of the cards we've seen so far in Moxtober, this is the card where I'm most like, oh, this is a constructed staple, because I feel like I don't know how to describe it because there's been other powerful cards, but I think that the way that the power is distributed here makes me think about like, oh yeah, this it fits. It has like a good role as a top end of an aggro deck. You can probably build around it in some way, and then copying burn. That's really good. So yeah, this I guess where I'm going with that is I would like to play the vibe it gives me is like, oh yeah, slam this in an XML file, let's throw it in Cockatrice, I'm going to build a deck around this. That's the vibe it gives me.
Oh yeah, yeah. I definitely want to put all my cheap creatures in my deck. That's already a lot of slots, and then I want to outfit it with tricks and stuff. That sounds really fun. Um, Question: I think it's the indomitable part is when survives damage, right? Other cards theoretically would be when this survives damage, this other thing, right?
Yep.
Okay. I I feel like I don't I feel like I've seen this on so many custom cards. Uh, s- uh, the following thing, which is survive. That's not a magic thing yet, right? That's a custom magic only world. Is that right?
I think that technically it's not. I suppose a creature being dealt non-lethal damage would currently be rules precise.
Ugh. Yeah, that does sound yucky. It would be cool to have survive eventually, which I'm supportive of. Um, but the reason why I bring it up is because there's the uh indomitable part, and then there's survives damage part. I guess it can help. I mean, I'm just wasn't sure if like if you pretend you're introducing this, but you should actually pretend it's evergreen in this case, which I guess then makes sense why you have Indomitable here to tell you, oh, this is a thing that is a triggered ability related to survives, rather than if it were a new thing in the set, you might go, oh, this is a survives creature. And you don't have to have Indomitable. You just say, oh, is he survive? Okay, yeah.
And originally, that was something along the lines of whenever it survives combat or a fight. Was how I think I had it originally. So the idea was when it attacks or blocks or fights and it lives through the end of that combat or that fight without dying to the state-based actions from the damage being marked on it. Um, but I got some like somewhat negative responses to that in terms of um, it becomes a little bit unclear on like, hey, if combat happens with blocking and a creature with Indomitable chooses not to block, does it happen? And like, it doesn't work for bite effects and just a bunch of other stuff like that. Um, it becomes a little bit arcane on.
I get it. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, Survives combat sounded really exciting when you just mentioned it, but it is true. I did start thinking of, wait, does that count if you're just exist in combat? I think survives damage is a very clean way to do it.
Um, One other thing that I want to point out is uh, the casting a card without paying its mana cost also applies to permanents for the cast a copy. So you can reanimate your 2 mana creature with this, for example.
Okay.
And it comes back as a token, so it's not super graveyard recursive forever. Um, but I've been enjoying that as a method of like flashbacking things lately, because it creates tokens that are copies of things, so you can um, like not have to worry about repetitive game states on giving a creature graveyard recursion if you do that.
Yeah, I think one thing that while you guys are talking that I thought of is I like how this plays into white having cards like Harm's Way, and I think that if there's an environment with Indomitable, like damage prevention or damage redirections stock suddenly goes way up, and you can make combat tricks that do that uh, have a lot more value as a result. And I think that would create an interesting environment specific textural limited thing. Yeah.
Oh, you could do a cool thing where you have a harm's way that prevents all but one damage that will be dealt to target creature this turn.
Hmm. I'm so glad you brought up Harm's Way. I love that card.
Yeah, Harm's Way is dope. Okay. And Bradley, what is our last card for the day going to be?
Well, let's go to MSC. There's been a few quick draws so far, but here's one of them. It's the one with the single name by Wow UBI. That user
It,
from Reddit looks like.
it's WoW I, and on Discord they go by Astrid with a B.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay. Yes. So this is a another card using the mechanic that was in Unstable. That one was Slaying Mantis, emulating um, a luchador wrestler or any, I guess, professional wrestler dropping on top of creatures and dealing damage to them. And the physical dexterity now, of course, I don't like to put those in my cube to be accessible, but if you are going to do just a second here and do the move, it recontextualizes the fact that you are throwing something at cards in that it's not showing that you're dropping on top of things. It's instead testing your ability to like shoot at something. It's more about you and your ability to aim.
Yeah, I think this is a lot of fun. Um, I could definitely see something. I don't even know how you would measure this in Magic, but just like a reaction time style thing where like two players have to throw a card at a thing at another card, and then whichever one lands underneath the other gets an effect. And if both players miss, and if both players miss each other, both players get penalized or something. So there's a thing of like, well, you got to be accurate, but you also got to be fast. So obviously,
Mm.
again, there's that thing of like, want to make sure that there's accessibility, but I like that idea of like draw and both players do something. And this is mostly unrelated to the design at hand. It's mostly just there as like uh, talking about silver border quick draw space made me think of that. Though I guess it has the same thing of like throwing a card. But yeah,
As far as accessibility goes for silver border dexterity cards, do you think silver border dexterity cards would be more accessible if they allowed the option for you to have another player do it on your behalf, just kind of baked in? So, like, as this spell resolves, a person throws it onto the battlefield from at least 2 feet away, rather than you being the person who has to do it. It just itself kind of generically says it's cool if anybody does this. If you want to have your buddy Steve throw it, that's fine.
I kind of like that. That's actually a really cute way of doing it, especially since they already have uncards which are like, hey, pull in someone who isn't in your current game, have them do a thing. So I could totally see that, and yeah, I think it would be
I
really
think
fun. Like everyone vying over, like Steve's got the throwing arm of a legend. You got it.
I uh I think that's an improvement to make sure to explicitly state it so people don't argue over something that's crappy. Um, but also, caveat, I am not impacted by the inaccessibility of this, so take my thoughts for with a grain of salt. I'm sure others might be able to have thoughts that might be the best solution or for it. I
Yeah,
totally missed Caillou when you brought it up. I'm glad you mentioned another player can also try their hand against this as well. It's cool. Now I'm like, oh man, this is cool. If someone else was forced to also quick draw cast because you granted your creature that's blocking their creature first strike and death touch, and you know that your creature is about to slay theirs, that they have an opportunity. Okay, now I have to cast mine because I don't want to lose my 5/5 against your 2/2 first strike death toucher. So, oh, okay, I won. So we both shot each other. Great.
For sure, yeah.
I do kind of wish that quick draw for an uncard had some sort of drawing competition between you and your opponent. Of like you and your opponent each draw the art on a card and some reward for whoever a third party judges had the better drawing.
Especially since it has Bowser Jr. in the card art. That's not the type of draw that's implied by the mechanics. Come on now.
Yeah, yeah. I was all like, oh, I, I don't know what's going. Oh, yeah. It took a second. I was like, oh, are you dealing with the paint? Oh, I see. Yeah.
But yeah, I think with that we've come to the end of end of this episode. So once again, thanks everyone for watching. Um, all the cards and their designers are in the description, as well as the full MSC and MTG.design files that these were drawn from, and instructions on how you can potentially submit your own cards to those to be considered for future episodes of this. Also, shout out to Cajun and Ancestral for setting up LackeyBot for MSC and MTG.design respectively, so that we can actually collect all of these cards. It has really streamlined the experience this year. Um, but yeah, other than that, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 10, Mystic. Until then, bye.